long ball is going to go for a touchdown. The game's over. Webster Slaughter.
Metcalf will go for the score. Unbelievable.
45-40. Run, William, run. He's got blockers in front. 5. Touchdown. Joshua Cribbs turns disaster into a score.
Sight wants it all on this one for Logan, and he is there.
Jim Brown to the 30. Jim Brown is going to go in for another touchdown.
The Cleveland Browns select Baker Mayfield.
Wow.
It is Baker Mayfield.
I woke up feeling dangerous.
Hello, Cleveland. Welcome to another episode of the 1085 Gridiron Podcast. It's episode number 97. I can't believe we're this close to 100 already. It's kind of crazy as we almost hit our 2-year mark as doing these things. I'm Anthony Joki, the host, and as always, I'm joined by my co-host, Jack McCurry of North Coast Sports. How you doing today, Jack?
I'm doing well, man. How about yourself?
Doing pretty well. We have a pretty huge episode lined up for everybody. We have 2 fantastic guests in this episode and 2 great interviews that we were able to conduct talking about the new coordinators of the Cleveland Browns, both Todd Monken and Steve Wilks. We'll be discussing those guys with Jeff Rich, who's the host of Sports Overnight America on Sirius XM Radio. He's a longtime Cleveland Browns fan, but he's a radio host out there in Arizona, so he was able to see Steve Wilks, and we have Philip. I'm going to butcher his last name, and I apologize in advance, but Schwegler. I hope that's right. He's going to come on. He runs FPC Buccaneers, and he does a fantastic job covering those guys, so we decided to get him on and talk Todd Monken. But before we get to those interviews, Jack, Freddie Kitchens was introduced as a head coach yesterday in the press conference. Do you have any overall takeaways from the things that he said yesterday in that press conference?
I mean, it was another introductory press conference. We're getting used to these in Cleveland, obviously. We've seen many in the last 20 years. But all in all, he killed the press conference as per usual with the new head coach. He just came off as very genuine to me, and what you see and what you hear is exactly what you're going to get out of Freddie Kitchens. I love that he pretty much called out the entire fan base. I think we can all admit that we were excited about 7-8-1, and he goes, "That's nothing to be excited about." He goes, "That's an improvement, but we want more. We want to get the Lombardi Trophy," and I actually agree with him. I mean, obviously, that's the ultimate goal. And in recent press conferences, you hear these guys all say that we're chasing greatness. And I think one time, Shermer said that the goal was to win the AFC North. That's not the goal. The goal is to go and hoist the Lombardi Trophy and win the Super Bowl. And, it's nice to hear a coach say that. I don't think we've heard anybody say that in quite a while. And, I thought it was great. I love that he wore a ball cap with his suit. I think that's the only time we'll probably see Freddie Kitchens in a suit. But that was per PR request that he had to. But all in all, I thought it was a great, genuine press conference. And hopefully it leads to great things in Cleveland with the Browns.
Yeah, if that didn't come from PR, he definitely would have been up there in that orange dog-bound hoodie that we've been so accustomed to him wearing. There were a few things that he said that really struck me. Well, the first thing was Tony Grossi told him, "We're with you, win or tie," and kind of chuckled. And Freddie was like, "That's not funny." Anytime someone goes after Tony, Greg Williams had that last year, and now Freddie this year. It's kind of becoming an annual tradition. I hope it follows next year. Somebody gets him again. The second thing was, we mentioned him being in a suit for once, and he said he wasn't going to be more head coach-ish. He's just going to act himself and be himself. And, I think that's one of the reasons he was really able to build such a camaraderie with all the players was he was himself, and he was able to relate to them, and hopefully he could do the same thing as the head coach of his football team. And the last thing he said, and I think it's going to go down as the quote of the press conference, he said, "If you don't wear brown and orange, you don't matter." That might be one of the best things I've ever heard a coach say since '99, since we've come back from this football team. And when you say something like that, I think he got a lot of fans riled up yesterday, and The fans were very prideful with him saying that, and I think Freddie. There have been a lot of guys that have really hit home runs in press conferences over the years, and Freddie hit another one. Let's just hope it actually translates to the football field this time.
Yeah, definitely. And I think you brought up one thing when you said he was going to be himself. He wasn't going to try to be this like figure head coach and try to be bigger than what he is. And I think the last head coach was prime example of that. Freddie just needs to be himself. He doesn't need to try to be like Mr. Tough Guy and act like he's the head of. Just because he's at the head of the table doesn't mean he's bigger than anybody else. He needs to be himself. He talked about relationships and collaborating, and I think that's what you want at the end of the day. If you're not ready for this, and some would argue that Freddie's not ready for this, then to lean on other people, and I think he's going to do that. I think you see that with the coaching staff he's built, that he's going to rely on everybody, and if he's in a situation where he's not ready or he's stuck in a moment or something, that he's going to lean on his assistants like that, and he's going to lean on John Dorsey. So I like that. I like that he's going to be himself. He's not going to change. Hopefully he doesn't, and he's going to stick to his guns and what's gotten to where he's at today. Absolutely.
And we mentioned that Freddie's putting together quite a fantastic staff so far, and two of the guys that he hired are offensive coordinator Todd Monken, who was with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers last year, and he also hired Steve Wilks, who's the head coach over with the Arizona Cardinals. And right now we're going to jump into our interview with Jeff Rich discussing Steve Wilks, and we'll be right back. All right, me and Jack are now pleased to be joined by Jeff Rich. He's our good old buddy. It's been a long time since we talked to Jeff. He's the host of Sports Byline Sports Overnight America. You can find that on Sirius 211. Jeff, how you doing, man? It's been quite a while.
I'm doing well. It's good to hear from you guys. Excited to talk about a little Cleveland. I do a nationally syndicated show, so I don't get to go back to my roots very often, though I do shoehorn the Browns, Indians, Cavaliers, Buckeyes in whenever possible.
Yeah, Jeff is from the Cleveland area, but he lives out in Arizona, so we decided to get him on here to talk about Steve Wilks and Arizona Cardinals. But first, obviously you're a Browns fan and have been your whole life, and we wanted to pick your thoughts about what you think has been going on with the Browns hiring Freddie Kitchens and, kind of the way they wrapped up the season with him on offense, and they decided to keep him around as head coach. So what do you think about what's been going on?
Well, I appreciate that there was a process that, the John Dorsey and Paul DePodesta and whoever else is involved with the decision-making as far as the coaching search goes, that they did their diligence. They didn't just reward Greg Williams for doing well after Hugh Jackson departed. I think that they really wanted to keep one of the incumbents, and then that's why they bookended the interviews with Greg Williams going first and Freddie Kitchens going last. And once Kitchens was interviewed, I figured that the interview process was over unless you had somebody that came in at the last minute, maybe for a second interview, a la Mike Pettin prior to the was it 2014 that he came in and was really successful out of the gate, or did he start the year before? There's just a big cluster of Browns coaches. Everything in between Mangini and now Freddie Kitchens just kind of blurs together. What was it, Chudzinski, and you had Mike Pettin, and you had that other guy that they hired from Cincinnati there for a few years. He didn't do so well. So I think this is promising. I think that it's really important when you have a young core like the Browns do to bring in somebody that they're on board with, somebody that they believe in. And I think that Freddie Kitchens, while he might not have been the best candidate for any other opening out there, that this was, I don't want to call it a home run hire for the Browns. This feels like a good hire in the present tense, but of course he's got to go out there and he's got to win football games.
Jeff, what was your thoughts on Baker Mayfield's rookie season?
Baker Mayfield's rookie season was surprisingly swell, to pull a term from the 50s. I was one of those guys that said he should sit and learn, and I realized that not everybody's Aaron Rodgers, but Baker Mayfield certainly exceeded expectations, even though he was the number 1 overall pick, just because of the environment that he came into. And I commend all of those. I commend this entire rookie class of 2018 for really hitting the ground running. Everybody down to Jannard Avery. I think before the season began, Anthony put it out there on one of the social media platforms, Oh, you put something out on social media. That's right. Anthony put it out on social media asking, for offensive, defensive rookie of the years. And I know that it would have been easy to go with Chubb or Ward or Mayfield and all of those guys certainly earned any accolades they received, by way of rookie of the week. I think I put it out there that the offensive rookie of the year would be Damian Ratley. He played sparingly this year, but I thought that Jannard Avery was really solid at linebacker, and if not for the great play of Denzel Ward when he was healthy, I think that he would have been the defensive rookie of the year on the Browns.
Absolutely. And, they had a really good rookie class, and, they decided to stick around with Freddie, who was able to get the best out of Baker Mayfield. I was also one of the guys that thought Baker should sit. I thought it would have been the best case scenario for the Browns if they were to be able to sit him for a year. But obviously he came in and did what he did with Freddie Kitchens at the helm, and Freddie started to, now that he got hired, he started to put together quite a good staff, at least on paper. And one of the guys that he hired, Jeff's other team is the Arizona Cardinals, because that's where he lives out there. And so obviously he's been able to see what Steve Wilks did last year. Jeff, looking at Steve Wilks, what did you think of the Browns hiring him as defensive coordinator after seeing him for a year out there in Arizona?
Okay, and my personal preference is that he has to run his own scheme. He kept the 4-3 system in place when he came over from Carolina. Basically replaced James Betcher as the defensive guy with the Arizona Cardinals. And I thought that he lost the locker room really quickly. Going back to maybe was it week 3 when they played the Chicago Bears out here in Glendale, that. The decision to go with Josh Rosen mid-game in week 3 when you're having it handed to you, I thought it was a mistake, and I think that Rosen wasn't quite ready, despite the fact that he was arguably the most day one ready guy coming out of UCLA compared to the rest of a pretty stellar rookie quarterback class.
Jeff, when you look at Wilks' defense, you said he ran a 4-3. Michael Bidwell, the team president of the Cardinals, was very critical of him last week, saying how Wilks switched from the 3-4 that Arizona was running to the 4-3. From what you watched on the defensive side of the ball, did he mix stuff up, or was he running just a straight 4-3? I know in today's NFL they do like to run a lot of sub packages.
It's disguise and surprise. We never saw the Browns run it with any level of success. I think that Mangini was probably the guy that best guided the Browns, but we're already talking about 10 years ago with that. So it's been a while. As far as the Cardinals, I think that they set things up to try to run that defense around the secondary and Chandler Jones rushing the quarterback. And I just think that they got caught, and I think that they got outcoached on many levels. Now, to say this for Steve Wilks is he was not the defensive coordinator. He was the head coach of the football team. So he's got a lot more responsibility there. I don't think anybody, they may have disguised, but looking around the NFC West, the success of Russell Wilson there, the success of Jared Goff, and the would-be success of Jimmy Garoppolo if San Francisco was throwing anything out there better than Nick Mullins, I think that the Cardinals could have had an even worse record than they did, and they were 3-13, and they earned themselves the number 1 pick in the draft. Now, if you go back to Carolina, it's a little bit tough because you always talk about winning with the other guys, with the other coaches' guys, and he was replacing Sean McDermott, who did a sensational job there with the Carolina defense. I wonder. looking back to Carolina, kind of just eternal sunshining the whole 2018 season with the Steve Wilks experiment as the head coach of the Arizona Cardinals. If you go back to Carolina, he had a player like Luke Kuechly. He didn't have any superstars in his secondary, but Carolina ran a pretty good defense, and defensive backs is Wilks' niche, his specialty, going all the way back to when he was coaching at the collegiate level.
Oh. There have been a lot of opinions that Steve Wilks got kind of a raw deal out there in Arizona. Do you feel or share that same sentiment?
Man, one and done is really tough. One and done, you really don't have much of an opportunity to let the team grow with you. And he was a players coach, and I was telling Jack this the other day. Players coaches are great. They get you to show up to practice on time. They get you to be a little bit loose as you're preparing for the game, but. Man, oh man, 3-13, and I think what it came down to, if Michael Bidwell was telling the truth, is that they just didn't think that Steve Wilks had any direction, and that's okay if you're going to be a coordinator. There are plenty. Dave Wannstedt comes to mind. There are plenty of guys out there, Buddy Ryan, that have demonstrated that they are among the best at the. When they could coordinate, when they can when they could just focus on one side of the football. Wade Phillips was never a great head coach in the NFL, and I don't know how much of an opportunity Greg Williams had in Buffalo, but he was never a great head coach. But he's been a good defensive coordinator at every stop, even in New Orleans, when his problems weren't so much related to how he schemed as much as how he motivated.
Yeah, we touched base on this the other day, Jeff. You were talking about, he was a player's coach, and obviously, Larry Fitzgerald spoke highly of him, and Charles Peanut Tillman even came out and spoke and said that Arizona needed to give him another opportunity. What made him so well liked by the coaches or by his players? Sorry, I
think he was just relatable. I don't think that he had, I don't think that he'd been a head coach long enough to have that corporate takeover where he dries out, and you guys watched Hard Knocks, that first episode when Freddie Kitchens and Todd Haley were bringing it to everyone's attention that these veterans hadn't earned days off, and Hugh Jackson, he definitely drew a line in the sand. I think that that was probably his biggest downfall, was he just didn't know how to be a head coach. He didn't know where the autonomy stopped with the head coach, and you became it's a little bit like Matt Nagy was criticizing Cody Parkey's appearance on the Today Show. That was a me thing. That wasn't a we or an us thing. And I think that Steve Wilks very much believed that there was an us, but I also believe that he was kept in the dark and that he wasn't given the power that he needed to succeed as a head coach. Now, as far as letting him go after one season, if you are going to let a coach go after one season, that was the season to do it. Well, not including Hugh Jackson's 1-15 or 0-16 seasons.
So we'll wrap up here with Arizona here, and then I got another Browns question for you. What did you think of Arizona hiring Cliff Kingsbury?
I think it's a daring hire. I think that I think that it's a reach. Especially considering this, this was a guy that was hired not as a head coach at the collegiate level, but as a coordinator at USC. I think that he's a good recruiter, which probably isn't going to help you if you're the Cleveland Browns. I mean, it might help to a certain extent. Pardon me, if you're the Arizona Cardinals. I think that Kingsbury has a chance to succeed, but you got to team him up with a great defensive coordinator, and you got to give him the personnel to succeed as well.
So. Looking at Steve Wilks and now the defensive players that he has here at Arizona, who do you think can really flourish under Wilks now that he's here in Cleveland?
Well, I would say Joe Schobert, and it depends on what he does with the scheme. I think that it would be a mistake to switch Larry Ogunjobi into a zero technique off of the 3 technique. I don't think the Browns have a true nose tackle on their roster. You'd like to think that Ogunjobi could translate, but I'd like to see Joe Schobert in the Luke Kuechly role. I know that he's not quite as athletic. There aren't any other Luke Kuechly's, but the one thing that frustrates me is, I mentioned that Wilks' niche was as a defensive backs coach, and this might not have anything to do with scheme or coaching or anything on the field, but Patrick Peterson, for the first time in his Arizona Cardinals career, asked for a trade. And, if you're a defensive backs coach, if that's your specialty and he wants out, then you're not doing something right.
Is there anybody on an Arizona defense that you know of as a free agent that played well under Wilks and their defensive coordinator that might follow into Cleveland?
Free agents with the Arizona Cardinals.
I know I kind of blindsided you with that one, and
I think that Buchanan's got a year left. Peterson's got a year left on his contract. I mean, you might be looking at a guy like Trey Boston, and I'm not sure what DJ Swearinger's contract is. Since Washington released him, the Cardinals signed him. I'm not sure if that resets his contract in any way. Who else from that defense? They're not getting Chandler Jones. Corey Peters, I guess, might be a possibility. Marcus Golden's not going anywhere. No, there's not really too many names on that defensive side, unless they want to work or trade for Patrick Peterson, which I don't imagine the Browns doing, despite all the cap space that they have.
Go ahead, Jack.
But wouldn't that be pretty sexy, though? Denzel Ward and Patrick Peterson in that secondary with the safeties that the Browns currently have?
It sure would. That's for sure.
Yep.
You can run cover two all day. You can run cover two man press all day with talented players like Peterson and Ward. But there's a reason that teams don't have two number one corners, and that's simply because it's hard to afford. Those contracts aren't tenable to maintain both of those guys.
Deion Buchanan is actually a free agent, and I know that Hassan Reddick was mentioned in trade rumors and that the Browns were talking to Arizona about linebackers, so they may rehash those trade talks at some point during the offseason as well.
Reddick was a Bruce Arians guy. If he's a free agent, I wonder if Tampa Bay might be a possibility for him as well. I mean, that's the thing is you had 1 year of Wilks and you had 6 or 7 years of Bruce Arians, so the relationships are definitely going to be stronger with the Tampa Bay head coach.
All right, Jeff, I really appreciate you coming on to join us. Talk a little Browns, talk a little bit Arizona Cardinals, and you mentioned earlier you don't get to talk Browns that often, but I'm sure this season with their turnaround, you got to talk quite a bit over there on your radio show. And if you want to give your radio show a plug and where everyone can listen to it, the floor is yours.
All right, we're on Sports Byline. The show is called Sports Overnight America. It airs from 10 until midnight Pacific time, so that's 1 to 3 for you guys on the East Coast. And on Sunday nights, I'm on, which is nice because we can recap the NFL action right away. Sunday nights, I just picked up, and I am on from 11 until midnight Pacific time. You can check Sports Byline for the schedule and follow me on Twitter at Jeff Rich Talks, or check out the Facebook page, facebook.com/Jeff Rich Talks.
All right, real quick, Jeff. Browns free agency draft. What do you do? Just real quick.
You'd like to improve the offensive line. You'd like to improve the defensive line a little bit. I'm not too concerned about receiver, but I think that they do need to try to get younger and overcome all of these Sashi Brown experiment picks outside of Rashad Higgins.
All right, Jeff. We appreciate you joining us, and I'm sure at some point here in the offseason we'll get you back on. I know our 100th show is just a few weeks away, so I would imagine we'll probably get you back on for that. You to say a few words, and it's great talking to you as always, and thanks for joining us.
Hey, the feeling is mutual. Reach out to me anytime, guys.
So that was our interview with Jeff Rich. So we hope you guys appreciated that. We appreciate Jeff coming on to discuss some Browns, some Arizona Cardinals, and hopefully you guys found out a little bit about our new defensive coordinator, Steve Wilks. All right, up next we have Philip Schwegler of FPC Buccaneers. He'll be joining us to talk about Todd Monken and among other Tampa Bay storylines, and hopefully you guys learn a bit from this interview. So here it is. All right, we're back now with Philip Schwegler. He's the managing editor of FBC Tampa Bay Buccaneers. How you doing tonight, Philip?
I'm doing wonderful, man. I appreciate you having me on.
Yeah, absolutely. And the reason we have you on, as I alluded to earlier, Todd Monken is the new offensive coordinator of the Cleveland Browns. It's interesting that he's not going to call plays. He took that job knowing that he isn't going to call plays. Freddie Kitchens is going to do that, but we want to get Philip in here to discuss Todd Monken. He's been with Tampa Bay for the last 3 years. And Philip, what's your overall take of how Todd has performed over the last few years with this Tampa Bay offense?
Well, I mean, and looking back, he started out as the offensive coordinator / wide receivers coach. And the big thing when he came in with Mike Evans had a lot of drops during that 2015 season. And if you watch how Todd Monken coached him, he gradually got better and those drops went away and the offense became more explosive. So I think overall he's just a great coach that can really work with whoever it is, be it receivers, be it quarterback, running backs, whatever have you. He seems to generate like that power in the room with the receivers and everything like that really brings out the most in the guys and really shows them that he wants them to be there and he wants them to get better.
You mentioned that passing game. They had the best passing attack in the NFL this past season, even though the record might not show it. But the issue that they had was their running game. How come they couldn't get the running game going this year?
To completely honest with you is that they didn't commit to the run game at all. As soon as the game started getting out of hand, and it happened a lot towards the end of the season in the second half, with them falling behind so much, they had to go straight to passing. So they never really gave the run game a chance. But then you also have to look at the offensive line for the Buccaneers. It's not what it used to be in 2015 when Doug Martin was second in the league in rushing. There's lots of holes in that offensive line, which prevented a lot of the running backs from getting, those big breaks on the runs and those big holes opened up. If you look back at a few games, you've seen Peyton Barber. He'll get like a 30-something yard run, and they get a call back because one of the offensive linemen got a holding call or some penalty to bring him back. But lack of commitment to the offensive line really hurt the team in rushing this season.
With the rushing attack, our two tackles aren't the best, and they were pretty average this year. It got a lot better once they put in Greg Robinson over Desmond Harrison. But did Tampa Bay do anything to schematically counter their weaknesses on the offensive line, or did they just try to go at it, try to run straight at it without really doing anything too special?
Well, I mean, during the offseason last season, we signed Ryan Jensen to the biggest contract for a center in the league. Other than that, we've had some younger guys that we brought up, like Caleb Benenoch and Alex Kappa that we drafted last season to try to maybe fill into the role of being more aggressive right next to Ryan Jensen, because everyone should know in the NFL, Ryan Jensen is one of the most aggressive offensive linemen in the NFL. But ultimately what hurt us is just we didn't get those key players in those key spots. Ryan Jensen was a great addition, but we needed somebody else to anchor down the other side of the line.
With that passing attack, obviously Jameis Winston had his ups. You didn't start the season. You guys had Ryan Fitzpatrick in there. You had Fitzmagic for a few weeks. And then, once Jameis came back in and took over, you played well for a little bit, but was there an overlying reason why things didn't work to the best of their abilities with Jameis this year?
Well, actually, we just had one of the local guys for the Tampa Bay Times do an interview with Jameis Winston, and one of the things he said about the season, it was just so weird for him because of the quarterback carousel or Russian roulette, whatever you want to call it, that was going on in Tampa. Because from my opinion, Dirk Cutter was trying to save his job, so whatever wins he could get, he was going to get them, whether it be Ryan Fitzpatrick in or Jameis Winston. So I think him being out of the building for those first 3 weeks really hurt him going into when he started playing again, because the team was winning. Those first 2 games were magical. And then he came back, and that's when the team started really falling apart. So he kind of got thrown into the fire, and it just seemed like he was looking over his shoulder every time he played, saying, if I mess up this, they're going to put Fitzpatrick back in. So overall, I think confidence really hurt him this season with the whole Ryan Fitzpatrick, Jameis Winston switching off starting roles.
And from what I could tell, I watched a couple of Tampa Bay games, including the one against the Browns, which I don't know how the Browns didn't win that game. But it seemed like it wasn't only Dirk Cutter that was pressing, but it was also Jameis pressing as well. Would you agree with that?
No, I do. And there's a couple times in that game where, if the Browns would have, not had a penalty or something like that, they could have ran away with the game and really took it. But toward the end, it just looked like the Bucs didn't want to win that game, and they were trying to give it to the Browns.
They did switch between Fitzpatrick and Jameis a few times. What did you notice from Todd doing different schematically wise between the two quarterbacks?
It seemed like some of the intermediate throws and some of the long throws were different for Jameis Winston compared to Brian Fitzpatrick, and that's just from my opinion watching the film. But I feel like Todd Monken knew that Jameis Winston was struggling with the deep ball, so he schemed it a little different, but still had that deep passing attack. One thing you guys will learn about Todd Monken is he's a very aggressive play caller. He likes to move the ball down the field. He likes to throw to the open receivers down the field, and then he likes to hide the tight ends too and make them pop up, and all of a sudden, it's a 45-yard touchdown. So I definitely looking at the player strengths, who he had in, I feel like he schemed to their abilities, and then maybe a few times they thought maybe Jameis Winston was getting hot. That's when he would start calling more deep balls, and that's when they started getting in trouble.
That kind of directly leads me to the next question. How would you describe Todd's offense? Because, this year with Freddie, he talked about in his press conference how he was still pretty much running Hugh Jackson / Todd Haley's offense. What do you think Todd is going to bring with his offensive style to the Browns?
Like I was saying, he's a very, very aggressive play caller. He's going to exploit the weaknesses. He likes to throw to those DBs with those one-on-one matchups, that type of thing. And I know he likes to try to get the run game going, which he was trying to do very hard in Tampa this past season, but it wasn't working. And when it doesn't work, that's when he starts scheming those little dump-off passes, maybe those passes in the flats. He tries to exploit the defense as much as possible. And depending on what kind of quarterback he has, I think ultimately will show you what kind of scheme he runs or how aggressive he will be. But I think you guys will be okay with Baker Mayfield. Baker Mayfield seems to be a playmaker already, being this first year in the league. So I don't think there'll be any problems with if Todd Monken starts to take over plays that him and Baker Mayfield will have any issues together.
Yeah, watching Baker this year, there's no doubt in my mind that he can make any kind of throw that you ask him to make. So if you ask him to make those deep ball throws or those short swing passes or anything, I think Baker could definitely, make all those kinds of throws, and hopefully that'll fit well with Todd and some of his ideas that he'll bring to Freddie Kitchens in terms of plays. What would you say is Todd's best and worst quality in terms of being an offensive mind?
He's a no BS guy. He's not gonna sugarcoat anything. So like we were talking about the play calling, if he doesn't feel like he can do it, he's not gonna make you do it. I think when you look back on the Buccaneers, a lot of the problems that were going on was because of Dirk Cutter's influence in the offensive play calling. So his biggest suit is his no BS take to everything, especially with the players. He doesn't want to lie to them. He doesn't want to make them feel any other way than what they should be feeling.
There are a couple guys on your offense that are free agents, but there's one in particular that I'm looking at, and that is Adam Humphries. He's had a steady incline of receptions over the past 4 years. As he's come into the NFL, you can see that in his yards, his targets, his receptions, and his touchdowns as well. I think he'd be a great fit here. What makes Humphries a really good receiver, and what is a really talented wide receiver room with Mike Evans, Chris Godwin, Deshaun Jackson, and Adam Humphries as well?
Well, with Adam Humphries, I mean, this guy is Mr. Dependable. You give this guy the ball, he's going to get it, and he's going to try to get more yards. You could literally give him any type of ball, and he's going to catch it. This year, he had a career highs in receptions, and I want to say yards and touchdowns this season. So he's definitely one of those security blankets that Jameis Winston has. You notice that as soon as Jameis came back into the game, Adam Humphries catching the slant here, Adam Humphries catching this and that. And the good thing about him is he runs his routes very crisply. He'll get to his spot, catch the ball, and try to move from there. So he's one of my favorite players on the Buccaneers teams as far as being reliable. And the whole thing with Tampa, they had the number one passing attack this season as far as yards go. And that's because they had guys like Mike Evans, Chris Godwin, O.J. Howard when he was healthy, Cameron Brate, and you can even add in Deshaun Jackson, Adam Humphries in there. But there are so many mouths to feed that I feel as the season started getting on, those guys that were a little bit more reliable, like the Mike Evans and then Adam Humphries and stuff like that, started getting more targets because they knew when they were down, those are the guys that we're going to throw to because those guys are going to help us get our first downs. So it'd definitely be really sad to see Adam Humphries leave. He's definitely a treasure here in Tampa Bay. But if Cleveland were to get him, I mean, you guys are going to open up a whole new game for your offense just with that one player.
Did he play mostly in the slot there down in Tampa?
Yeah, mostly in the slot. I mean, they moved him a few other places just to kind of disguise things. And he also returned punts. So, I mean, he's an overall good player. Wherever you put him, he's going to play. He's a team player. He's not going to give any fuss or argue about anything. He just wants to play football and try to help the team win.
Is he pretty sure-handed? Because I noticed, looking up some of his stats, he has a very high catch rate. It would have been the second highest here on the Browns. Are his hands pretty good?
His hands are excellent. I want to say it was the Carolina game that we had here at home. He got rocked by two guys at the same time, top and bottom, still came up with the ball somehow. So his hands are very trusty. To see him fumble the ball or get a drop is very rare.
All right, I think that pretty much does it for the Browns stuff. I have a couple Tampa Bay stuff just to get some insight from you guys about what Tampa Bay is going to do this offseason. Obviously, you guys hired Bruce Arians. What did you think overall of that hire and the coaching staff that he started to put together so far?
This is the most excited I've been to cover the Buccaneers as far as coaching staff goes. I mean, Bruce Arians is a very, 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 coveted guy around the league. Everyone knows what he's done. I mean, the quarterbacks that he's worked with, Peyton Manning, Andrew Luck, Carson Palmer, got the last few good years out of them towards the end there, and then Big Ben over over the Steelers for a long time. I'm very excited to see what he can do with Jameis Winston, and ultimately I think he was brought here to try to fix. I don't like saying fix, but try to assist Jameis Winston and really reaching his full potential. And he's brought in like an extra staff. Like if you look at all the coaches he's hired, he literally has a second coaching staff that they're going to use during training camp and that kind of thing to really evaluate players. And one of the more exciting things about his staff is how we got Todd Bowles. He's going to be our defensive coordinator. I'm very excited about that. Very aggressive play caller, very aggressive guy. He likes to blitz the quarterback a lot. And he doesn't like disguising things. He likes running a lot of those cover zeros, cover one. So Bruce Arians coming to Tampa has definitely sparked a lot of hope in the fan base. When you're walking down the street, you see Buccaneers jerseys, in January when usually everyone's all sad because we're not playing football in January.
It's a good thing that the Browns hired Freddie Kitchens as their head coach, because if he wasn't, he probably would have been down there in Tampa Bay as your offensive coordinator because he worked under Arians before. And I think that was a good connection that would have happened if Kitchens weren't to be the Browns head coach. You talked about Jameis a little bit, and it kind of leads me into my last question here. Do you think that there's any chance that they move on from Jameis if Bruce Arians likes one of these quarterbacks in the draft more than Jameis?
If you know Bruce Arians, he's the guy who's going to say out front at the beginning, this is my quarterback, this is who I'm running with. And he's already said it actually in his introductory presser last week that Jameis Winston is his guy, this is his team, this is who I'm moving forward with. We will get competition in for the backups. He never said anything about competition for Jameis. So Jameis Winston is going to be the quarterback for the 2019 season. And if he does play well enough, he'll be the first quarterback for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers to get a second contract in franchise history.
Well, that's a pretty interesting stat because for the Browns, they haven't had a guy reach their second contract since Brian Sipe since the 80s. So hopefully Baker Mayfield can break that trend as well. All right, Philip, I really appreciate you coming on. Do you want to go ahead and plug everything over at Full Press Buccaneers and your podcast as well?
Yeah, sure. You guys can find everything that me and my guys do on fullpresscoverage.com/Buccaneers or on Twitter, FPC_Buccaneers. We literally cover everything, opinions. We do articles about draftees, players coming up, everything you want to find about the Buccaneers, you look on there. We also do, me and my partner, Mark Magana, we do the Red Flag podcast, and we record every Tuesday. And then we also do a live show at Bucks Report on Facebook. We do a live show every Wednesday night around midnight. So check those out if you guys are Buccaneer fans or just curious to see what it is.
All right, Phil, I really appreciate you coming on. And, I've known Ian Glendon, who started up Full Press for quite a while, and him and I still talk. And I really love what that website has done, and from what it used to be over at Cover 32 to what it's become now at Full Press. And you guys have done a fantastic job. Not just your website, but across all the NFL, all the teams that they do. And Full Press is definitely a website that our listeners should check out as well. All right, Phil, I appreciate it. Thank you for coming on, and maybe sometime in the future we'll have you on again.
Sure thing, man. I appreciate it. Good luck this season. Let's see what Freddie Kitchens and Mayfield can do this year.
Absolutely. All right, thanks, Phil. All right, I want to thank both Philip and Jeff for joining us on this episode. We got some great insight on both our new two coordinators of the Cleveland Browns, and I really appreciate those guys coming on and taking the time out of their day, spending it with us, and giving our listeners some good insight on what we can expect from Todd Monken and Steve Wilks as well. All right, before we get out of here, I'm all by myself now. We recorded this on 2 separate days, so I'll be wrapping this up by myself. And before we get on out of here, we kind of want to give our AFC NFC Championship picks for this weekend. We got 2 fantastic games. We have the Kansas City Chiefs playing host to the New England Patriots. We have the New Orleans Saints playing host to the Los Angeles Rams. These are going to be 2 fantastic games. Whatever the outcomes are, the Super Bowl, I think, is going to be a fantastic matchup, whether it be Rams-Patriots, whether it be Rams-Chiefs, in that classic rematch of the game we had earlier this season. It could be Saints and Patriots, a matchup of 2 older quarterbacks looking to add to their legacy. It'd be great to see Drew Brees get a second Super Bowl. I know me and Jack, actually I picked the Saints to go Super Bowl. He picked the Rams to go to the Super Bowl. So it's going to be a very interesting matchup. So Jack sent me a message about who he's taking this weekend. He said the Patriots over the Chiefs. While Mahomes and the Chiefs have been soaring, they aren't ready yet to knock off the Kings of the AFC. Brady and Belichick will advance to their 8th Super Bowl appearance. He's picking the Saints over the Rams. He said he did pick the Rams to go to the Super Bowl in the preseason, but he thinks the Saints are the superior team at this moment. They will shut down Anderson and Gurley, and Brees will get a shot at a second Super Bowl. I'm pretty much at that same sentiment. Last week I picked the Chargers to beat the Patriots, and you know what? I'm not making that mistake again. If I'm wrong 2 weeks in a row, so be it. But I think I've learned my lesson to not pick against the New England Patriots. So I will go Patriots over the Chiefs, and I will also be picking the Rams to go, or be picking the Saints to win over the Rams. I picked the Saints in the preseason to go to the Super Bowl, and I'm sticking with that. They have a great atmosphere there down in the Superdome. And that's just such a tough place to play. And early in the season, the Saints did stop the Rams in that place as well. So I think the Saints are going to win the rematch. And for Drew Brees to get another shot at a Super Bowl, for it to possibly be his second one, would just be a fantastic storyline for the next 2 weeks to talk about. And I'm really excited for the matchups this weekend, and they're going to be 2 fantastic football games, that's for sure. All right, as we get on out of here, be sure to check out Jack's work over at the NorthCoastSports.com. Be sure to follow him on Twitter at JMcCurryCLE. He's had a lot of stuff going on over there between the Buckeyes, the Browns, of course, and not so much the Cavs because the Cavs are terrible, but every now and then he'll write something about the Cavs. Be sure to follow me on Twitter at Anthony Joki, Joki. Be sure to follow the podcast on Twitter and on Facebook at 1085Gridiron. You can find our podcast in pretty much any platform that you can think of, including iTunes, SoundCloud, Google Play, Spotify, and iHeartRadio. Be sure to subscribe, rate, and review our podcast. We absolutely appreciate it. And as we get out of here, I'll leave you with this as I do at the end of every episode, and that is, Go Browns.